No one in Judge Judy's courtroom that morning had any idea that they were minutes away from witnessing the most shocking takedown of a billionaire in television history. People had seen arrogance before. They had seen entitlement. They had seen disrespect. But nothing, not the worst Karens, not the loudest scammers, not the most unhinged plaintiffs, came close to what was about to unfold when Landon Pierce strolled into the courtroom with the kind of smug superiority only a self-made tech billionaire could perfect. He wasn't nervous. He wasn't humble. He wasn't even pretending. He walked in with the slow, casual confidence of a man who genuinely believed he was bigger than the judge, bigger than the courtroom, and bigger than the law itself. And the shocking part? He made sure everyone knew it. What the audience didn't know was that this wasn't just another arrogant man with too much money. This was the 39-year-old founder of Pierce Labs, a tech empire valued at over $42 billion, built on social algorithms, AI-driven products, and digital dominance. He had spent a decade being worshipped on magazine covers, tech panels, and investor conferences. Every room he walked into bent to his will. Every critic was silenced before they could even finish a sentence. Every competitor was swallowed whole or destroyed. In his world, power wasn't just influence, it was oxygen. And he believed he had an unlimited supply. But today, Landon Pierce was about to suffocate. The moment he sat down at the defendant's table, you could feel it, an invisible shift in the atmosphere. The audience leaned forward. The bailiff straightened his stance. Judge Judy didn't even raise her eyes yet, but somehow, she already felt his presence. And so did Elena Morales, the woman sitting across from him, fingers tightly gripping a folder of printouts and emails that represented not just evidence, but her entire life's work, everything she had built, and everything Landon had tried to destroy. Landon glanced in her direction, smirked, and whispered something to his attorney. The attorney laughed nervously, like a man who knew he should not be laughing but was too afraid to disagree with his billionaire client. Landon didn't care. His eyes scanned the courtroom as if he owned it, as if it were another conference room built for him to dominate. He interrupted whispers, adjusted his cufflinks, and sat with the relaxed posture of a man who believed consequences did not apply to him. And then Judge Judy finally looked up. The courtroom fell silent in an instant. Judy had reviewed the case file earlier that morning, and something about the tone, the pattern, the imbalance between the two parties had alerted every instinct she had developed over decades on the bench. She knew entitlement. She knew manipulation. She knew abuse of power. But the moment she saw Landon Pierce's face, she recognized something even worse, a man who believed the world belonged to him. "Mr. Pierce," she began, her tone controlled, calm, measured, "you seem very comfortable for someone being sued." He smiled, one of those slow, dismissive smiles reserved for people he believed were beneath him. "Well," he replied, "I'm not exactly intimidated. I've dealt with regulators, senators, investors, this should be easy." A faint ripple of disbelief moved through the courtroom. Judy didn't react. She simply continued reading her notes. Landon interpreted her calm silence as weakness, as opportunity. And that was when he made the mistake that would set the entire world on fire. When Judy pressed him again, this time asking a direct question about the counter-lawsuit he filed against Elena, Landon let out a small, irritated laugh. "Honestly, Judge," he said, leaning back with infuriating confidence, "I'm not concerned. Your family's entire legacy is built on reruns and nostalgia. My family builds the future. So no offense, but this," he gestured broadly at the courtroom, "the cameras, the people, isn't real power. It's entertainment." The courtroom didn't breathe. The audience froze. Elena's eyes widened. The bailiff took one half-step forward, sensing something seismic was about to happen. The producers behind the cameras held their breath. Landon Pierce had not just crossed a line, he had hurled himself over a cliff. Judge Judy didn't blink. Her eyes narrowed a fraction of an inch, just enough for the viewers at home to know that something terrible had awakened. The silence stretched so long and so tightly that you could practically hear the weight of Landon's words sinking into the floor. And then Judy spoke. "Mr. Pierce," she said softly, too softly, "you just made the most expensive mistake of your entire life." A ripple of dread crawled across the courtroom. The audience could feel it. The viewers at home would later say they felt it through the screen. Something was about to snap, something massive, irreversible, and historic. But before everything exploded, before the evidence, the revelations, the destruction, pause for one thing. If you're watching this and you believe no amount of money, fame, or power should ever place someone above consequences, hit that like button right now and subscribe. Because what Judge Judy is about to reveal about this billionaire will shock you more than any tech scandal you've heard this year. Landon Pierce had no idea that the next 20 minutes would destroy the empire he built, expose the lies he lived by, and turn him into the symbol of what happens when ego tries to challenge justice. And Judge Judy was just getting started. The shift in the courtroom was immediate. After Landon Pierce disrespected Judge Judy's family legacy, the atmosphere thickened into the kind of heavy silence usually reserved for the moments before a storm breaks. Elena Morales, the plaintiff, felt her heartbeat pounding so hard she wondered if the microphones were picking it up. She had expected arrogance from him, yes. She had expected denial. She had expected manipulation. But she had not expected him to attack a judge's family so boldly, so publicly, and so stupidly. It was the kind of disrespect that didn't just cross lines, it obliterated them. Judy didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam the bench. She didn't even lean forward. Instead, she did something far more terrifying. She sat back, folded her hands neatly, and looked at Landon Pierce as if she were finally seeing the real man behind the billion-dollar facade. And what she saw made every viewer at home instinctively straighten their posture. "Let's begin," she said. Those two words carried more power than any lecture on Wall Street ever had. She asked Elena to explain, in her own words, what brought them to this courtroom. Elena swallowed, her hands trembling just enough for the front row of the audience to notice. She had been preparing for this moment for weeks, rehearsing her statements in her bathroom mirror, practicing deep breaths in her car, reminding herself that this man who had nearly destroyed her business was just a human being, not a god. But sitting across from him now, with his cold smirk and dismissive gaze, she felt every wound reopening. "Your Honor," she began softly, "I worked for Mr. Pierce's company for 9 years. I was one of the lead designers for Pierce Labs' environmental AI division." Landon rolled his eyes, shifting loudly in his chair, as if the entire courtroom was wasting his time. Elena continued. 18 months ago, I discovered internal documentation showing that Pierce Labs was using our environmental models to manipulate consumer data. They weren't helping communities predict pollution, they were selling prediction access to private investors before the data was made public. Judy raised one eyebrow. "Insider advantage?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And you have proof of this?" She held up the folder. "Emails, logs, internal memos. Everything." The audience murmured. They weren't tech experts, but they understood enough to know that what Elena just described wasn't just unethical, it was illegal. Judge Judy turned to Landon. "Mr. Pierce, do you have anything to say before I review the evidence?" He didn't bother hiding his disdain. "Your Honor, Elena is a disgruntled former employee who violated her NDA. She was fired for poor performance. This is nothing but an attempt to extort a settlement before her little startup collapses." Elena's jaw tightened. She had spent 10 years building her reputation and had never received a single complaint about her performance until she confronted the company's misconduct. But Judy wasn't finished. "You filed a counter-lawsuit," Judy said, flipping through the papers. "Defamation, breach of contract, financial sabotage. You claim she cost your company $37 million in projected revenue." Landon nodded smugly. "Correct. And that she did so intentionally to damage your public image?" "Because she wanted revenge," he said, almost laughing. Judy stared at him. Not a blink. Not a twitch. Just cold, unwavering silence. And then she said something that made every person in the room feel a chill run down their spine. Mr. Pierce, you insulted my family. Now I'm going to ask you a question, and you need to answer it honestly. The smirk vanished. In the last 3 years, how many whistleblowers has your company fired? He blinked. That's irrelevant. How many? That's privileged internal. How many? She repeated, her voice razor sharp. Landon's attorney interjected. Your Honor, my client is not required to. Sit down, Judy snapped without even looking at him. He sat. The audience held their breath. Judy leaned forward just slightly, not enough to seem aggressive, but enough to signal that something very important was happening. Mr. Pierce. This courtroom is not your boardroom. You do not get to bully, silence, or threaten your way out of questions. So I will ask again, and this time you will answer. Landon swallowed. For the first time since entering the courtroom, a flicker of anxiety crossed his face. 5, he muttered. Loud whispers rippled through the audience. 5 whistleblowers, Judy repeated. And each one was fired within 30 days of reporting internal misconduct. That's standard procedure, he barked. They violated confidentiality. No, Judy said, voice cool as marble. That's retaliation. Landon's face flushed with anger. Judy picked up Elena's folder and opened the first email. Let's read one aloud, shall we? She said. This one is from your senior engineer, written 2 days before she was terminated. Landon's jaw clenched. Mr. Pierce, I believe using our AI models to provide investors with early environmental data is not only unethical but illegal. We need to stop. She closed the folder gently. And she was fired 12 days later for disruptive behavior. Coincidence? Landon said nothing. The audience knew. The viewers at home knew. Judy knew. The empire he thought protected him was starting to crack. Judy's voice dropped to a lower, quieter, more dangerous tone. Mr. Pierce, you didn't come here today expecting justice. You came here expecting obedience. Every word hit him like a strike. But you walked into the wrong courtroom. And you disrespected the wrong family. Landon's expression hardened, arrogance fighting panic. And the real destruction hadn't even begun yet. What happened next would become the turning point of the entire case, the exact moment when the billionaire who thought he controlled every room finally realized he had no control here. Judge Judy leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing with the kind of precision that had taken down thousands of liars, manipulators, and professional charmers. But Brent Calloway wasn't ready to accept that he was in danger. In his mind, consequences were for regular people. He was a billionaire, a tech mogul, a Silicon Valley king who owned 3 companies, 2 penthouses, and the loyalty of millions of fanboys online. This courtroom? To him, it was a stage, and he was the star. He crossed his arms, smiling with smug amusement, as if Judge Judy were simply another outdated system he planned to disrupt. Judge Judy turned to Mrs. Friedman, the elderly teacher Brent had so casually insulted and humiliated. Ma'am, she said firmly, continue from where you left off. The quiet old woman nodded, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. She described how Brent had berated her in a grocery store for refusing to cut in line for him. She talked about how he laughed when she couldn't carry her own bags. She recalled how he took a photo of her and posted it online, calling her a parasite of society. The audience gasped as she described receiving thousands of hateful comments, threats, and mocking edits. She lost sleep. She lost her sense of safety. She lost the dignity she had protected for 72 years. As she spoke, something in the room shifted. Even Brent's fake smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. But still, he recovered with arrogance. Your Honor, that's just online culture, he said dismissively. People post things about me all the time. I don't cry about it. Judge Judy's eyebrows rose in silent, devastating disbelief. People post about you because of your choices, she replied sharply. This woman is not a public figure. She is not your punching bag. She is not a prop for your ego. Brent rolled his eyes again, the wrong move at the worst possible moment. Then came the moment that electrified the courtroom. Judge Judy asked her bailiff to hand her a printed packet. She flipped calmly to the second page. Mr. Calloway, do you recognize this? Brent shrugged lazily. Looks like a comment thread. So what? Judy's voice hardened. This is your verified account encouraging your followers to teach her a lesson. The next morning, she received over 600 hateful messages. One of them told her to die slowly. Brent let out a lazy laugh. Freedom of speech, Your Honor. I can't control what my fans do. That arrogance, that absolute refusal to accept responsibility, was the gasoline poured straight onto the fire. Judge Judy's tone dropped several degrees colder. You can't control them, no. But you absolutely intended to influence them. She looked straight through him, seeing the truth he tried to bury. You targeted a woman who couldn't defend herself. You used your platform to attack someone who posed no threat to you. And you enjoyed watching the chaos you caused. It was the first time Brent shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his heartbeat finally matching the danger he was in. Then came the reveal no one saw coming. Judge Judy slid another document to the bailiff. Mr. Calloway, she said, you also posted this. It was a screenshot of a quote card he had made himself, a smug motivational graphic that read, weak people hide behind rules. Strong people create their own. Under it, he had commented, just like Judith Steinberg, the failed lawyer who thinks yelling makes her powerful. A chill cut through the room. He hadn't just mocked her family. He had mocked her real name, and called her a failure, to millions of people. Brent's smirk died immediately. Judge Judy slowly removed her glasses, something she rarely did unless a line had been crossed so severely it transformed her entire demeanor. The silence was suffocating. Even the bailiff shifted his stance, ready for whatever storm was coming. Judy stared directly at Brent, her voice now a lethal whisper. You attacked my name. You attacked my profession. You attacked my family. And you did it for entertainment. Brent opened his mouth to explain, to spam excuses like he did in boardrooms, but Judy raised a hand sharply, stopping him mid-breath. Don't speak. The authority in her tone made even the audience flinch. You may run companies. You may control investors. You may intimidate employees. But you do not, under any circumstances, control me. For the first time, Brent Calloway looked like a man without a plan. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowed, and he inhaled sharply, but it was no longer confidence. It was fear dressed in expensive arrogance. Judge Judy continued, her voice steady as a blade. This courtroom operates on truth, integrity, and respect. 3 things you have spent your entire adult life avoiding. She flipped through more papers. And based on the evidence presented, the damage you caused Mrs. Friedman is neither small nor accidental. It is measurable, provable, and punishable. Brent swallowed hard. The tide had turned completely. And this was only the beginning. The moment Judge Judy delivered her preliminary ruling, we will now review the evidence you claim proves your innocence. The entire courtroom could feel a shift. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was the kind of silence that arrives right before a storm tears the world apart. Ethan leaned back in his chair, that signature billionaire arrogance radiating off him like cheap cologne. He smirked, crossing his arms confidently, as if he was preparing to watch Judy embarrass herself with some outdated understanding of technology. His lawyers mirrored his swagger, exchanging smug glances, already convinced the case was moving in their favor. Ethan even whispered loudly, "This is going to be fun," earning a few uncomfortable looks from the audience. Judge Judy heard it. She always heard it. And instead of reacting, she simply opened the folder placed before her, Ethan's so-called defense packet. Judy flipped through the pages with surgical precision. One page. Another. And another. Then she set the papers down and looked straight at Ethan with an expression so cold it could have frozen the sun. "Mr. Hale," she said, her voice dangerously even, "do you think I'm stupid?" The billionaire's smile faltered for the first time. "Excuse me," he said, confused laughter bubbling up. "This is verified data from my security team." "Your security team," Judy repeated, tapping the paper. "Not law enforcement. Not a third-party auditor. Not even the company you claim was involved in the breach. This is a self-written report from your own employees, conveniently exonerating their boss." Ethan opened his mouth to object, but she raised a hand sharply. "Don't bother. I've seen forged bank statements, manipulated medical documents, and fabricated property records for over 3 decades. This," she held the paper up, "is the laziest attempt at manufactured evidence I have seen in years." The audience gasped. Ethan's jaw tightened. His lawyers shuffled nervously. But Judy wasn't done. She reached under her bench, pulled out a sealed manila envelope, and placed it in front of her with deliberate care. "This," she said, "is the independent forensic report submitted by the FTC's Cybersecurity Division." Ethan's face drained of color. He hadn't counted on Judy obtaining that report. "And unlike your internal summaries, this report is signed, time-stamped, and verified by 3 federal analysts." She opened the document slowly, savoring the moment. "It states, very clearly, that the code used to leak those private emails originated from your personal server at Hale Tech headquarters, using credentials tied to your executive account." Ethan shot up from his chair. "That's impossible," he barked. "Those credentials were stolen." "No," Judy snapped. "They weren't." She turned the page. "The report further confirms that the breach occurred after your very public clash with Megan's father, the man you insulted in front of 1,000 guests at a charity gala, dismissing his decade-long military service as irrelevant in the modern economy." The courtroom turned electric. For the first time, Ethan Hale looked genuinely afraid. Judy continued, each sentence sharper than a blade. 3 days after that insult, the breach occurred. 2 hours after the breach, the leaked emails appeared online. And 40 minutes after that, you posted a cryptic tweet mocking people who cling to their outdated values. Ethan stammered, "That tweet was unrelated." "Oh, stop," Judy said, leaning forward. "You are not on Twitter right now. You are in a courtroom where your words actually have consequences." The audience chuckled nervously. Ethan's face twisted with frustration. "You can't connect these things," he insisted. "Correlation isn't chaos." "Stop talking," Judy said sharply. "You are digging yourself deeper by the second." She shifted her focus to Megan, whose quiet strength had become the emotional core of the room. "Miss Brooks, would you please confirm the timeline of your father's harassment?" Megan nodded, voice steady. "The anonymous messages targeting his military service began the morning after Mr. Hale tweeted that." Judy nodded. "Exactly. Direct cause. Direct effect. And Mr. Hale," she jabbed a finger at him, "is arrogant enough to think nobody would piece that together because he lives in a world where he's never been told no." Ethan clenched his fists, struggling to maintain control. "This is a witch hunt," he snapped. "You're twisting everything because you're offended that I mentioned your family, and there it is," Judy said, her voice dropping into an icy calm that made the room still. "The truth buried inside your tantrum." She stood. "You insulted my family because you thought it would destabilize me. You underestimated me because you underestimate everyone. You have spent years surrounded by employees who are afraid to challenge you, lawyers who clean up after you, and investors who worship your money more than your morality." She stepped closer. "But you made the mistake of coming into my courtroom. And in here, your power does not exist. Ethan tried one last attempt. You have no proof I ordered anything. Judy smiled, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that appears right before a hammer drops. You're right, she said. You didn't order it. Ethan blinked. Then what? You authorized it. And that makes you responsible. The blow landed like an explosion. Ethan collapsed back into his seat. His lawyers stared at the floor. Megan covered her mouth, trembling, not from fear, but from relief. Judy sat down again, folding her hands. Section 4 of my ruling is simple, she announced. The evidence overwhelmingly shows you retaliated against a veteran's family over a petty, ego-driven insult. And now, Mr. Hale, she paused. Now comes the part where you learn what accountability feels like. The courtroom was silent in a way that felt unnatural, like the air itself was waiting for something to break. Cade Whitlock stood frozen, hands limp at his sides, eyes wide and hollow, as if the reality of what had just happened was too enormous to fit inside his brain all at once. A man who'd spent his life bending reality, technology, contracts, staff, money, to his will was finally realizing there existed one room in the world where none of those tools mattered. Judge Judy watched him with the composed expression of someone who had dealt with kings, billionaires, criminals, geniuses, and fools, yet still understood exactly how to humble each one in her own unmistakable way. When she spoke, her voice was steady. Controlled. Sharp enough to slice through the last threads of Cade's confidence. Mr. Whitlock, she said, you built a company worth over $40 billion. But you never learned the one skill that matters more than all the code you've written, all the patents you've filed, all the money you've collected. She paused. Respect. The word hit harder than any fine, any ruling, any legal punishment he'd ever faced. Cade's throat tightened, and he blinked hard, trying to keep his composure, but his face was a tell. That word didn't just sting, it exposed everything he tried so desperately to hide. The truth that behind the private jets, the flashy interviews, the global fame, and the curated image was a man with no real power where it counted. Judge Judy continued with the calm certainty of someone delivering a moral autopsy. You walked into my courtroom speaking to my bailiff, my staff, and my own daughter with the tone of someone who believes his wealth is a shield. Or worse, a weapon. She leaned slightly forward. Let me make this very simple, it isn't. The audience was silent, but their eyes were sharp with the same disbelief. They had seen celebrities melt down, athletes lose control, politicians bluster, but nothing compared to the spectacle of watching a billionaire tech founder get stripped of every ounce of his self-importance. Dana Sullivan, the woman Cade had bullied, degraded, and retaliated against, sat rigidly at her table. Her hands trembled, but this time not from fear, from relief. Validation. Survival. Years of humiliation finally coming to a close. When Judy turned her gaze toward Dana, her tone softened just enough to signal compassion without compromising authority. Ms. Sullivan, your testimony and your evidence were compelling, consistent, and truthful. You were retaliated against. You suffered professional, emotional, and financial harm. She turned her attention back to Cade. And you, Mr. Whitlock, did so knowingly. Cade's lips parted, as if he was about to speak, but Judy held up a finger, not unkind, but with a clear message, you've said enough. The court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Judy said. Ms. Sullivan, you are awarded damages totaling $112,000. The number felt like a punch to the room. Even the camera operator jerked slightly, stunned at the figure. She continued, this includes lost wages, emotional distress, and punitive damages for deliberate retaliation. Cade's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly bright with panic. The amount was insignificant to him financially, but what it represented, that was catastrophic. The entire case would become public record. The headlines would write themselves. Boards would question him. Investors would pull back. Employees would talk. Competitors would celebrate. And worst of all, the the world would learn that the brilliant billionaire who lectured others about innovation and leadership had been humbled in the one courtroom where character, not wealth, was the currency. Judge Judy wasn't finished. She folded her hands, her expression unreadable. "Mr. Whitlock, you may believe this ends with a financial award. It doesn't. Let me offer you a piece of advice, and you would be wise to take it seriously." She waited until his eyes met hers. "If you continue treating people like stepping stones, you will eventually discover that there's no one left to catch you when you fall. And the fall you're headed for," she shook her head slightly. "It won't be nearly as gentle as this." A murmur of shock rippled through the audience. Cade swallowed hard, his face losing every trace of arrogance. For the first time, he truly seemed small. Dana pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears, not of sadness, but of release. Years of torment collapsing in a single moment of justice. The bailiff made a subtle motion, signaling the end of the case, but Cade didn't move. He stood there, paralyzed, as if waiting for someone, anyone, to give him the script on how to recover from a moment like this. But there wasn't one. Not for him. Judge Judy tapped her gavel once. Case dismissed. The sound echoed like a final, perfect ending to a story that had needed to be told for far too long. Cade staggered back a step, his breath uneven, the reality hitting him like a cold wave. He had built empires, commanded rooms, intimidated rivals, shaped industries, but today, in this courtroom, he had learned the most expensive lesson of his life. Respect isn't bought. It's earned. And he had earned none. He turned to leave, but before he reached the door, he heard the audience whispering, not in awe of him, but in awe of the judge who had stripped his ego clean. It was over. And this time, even his billions couldn't save him.